Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, just working on some commerce stuff with GraphCMS. So this is the kind of store that we're building out, which is going to be one of the new reference applications. So I worked on this previously in the last stream, added a cart. So what we've got now is kind of a functioning e-commerce flow. We can add these products to our cart. We've got local cart state that we can manage here, decrement stock, remove items. And all of this is completely localized as well. You can see we have German here using Next.js localized routing, and also currency switching as well. And this will actually be reflected in the cart and also in the checkout process, which is using Stripe checkout. So if we have a look quickly at that, and then we'll dive into what we're actually going to work on today. So here's our English cart. I can switch currency, and I can also switch localization. Yeah, and then if we actually check out here, there's no localized UI. Everything's coming from the CMS and it's built. The products are built from the CMS using GraphCMS localization. But what we've got as well is we've got Stripe checkout here. We can amend the quantity accordingly. It's all localized, which is passed via the kind of active local that's set in Next.js. So this is all very nice. And this is mostly built using kind of Next.js's data fetching primitives. Get static props, get static paths, and get server-side props, which we're not using that, but that's another one of their built-in data fetching primitives. But they don't handle kind of fetching data on the client, and that is a common use case in commerce verticals where you might want to fetch inventory. Your inventory might be obviously real time. You want to kind of get that latest data. Or in our case, we're actually going to add reviews, so product reviews. So to do that, we're going to have to we want to fetch the latest reviews for the product on the product page, not at build time. So we're not going to rule out Next.js as kind of data fetching primitives. We're actually going to use some client-side requests, and this is where kind of SWR comes in. It's my personal kind of library that I go to if I'm doing any kind of client-side API requests. Yeah, it's really nice. It's built around the whole stale while revalidate kind of concept, so that you will always have a localized cache version of your data, and SWR will go off in the background and actually kind of revalidate that data via the API and then rehydrate the UI. So it gives you this concept of being super fast while you're actually while you're navigating around your UI. It will load the cache in and then actually go off and revalidate that data from the API and rehydrate it accordingly. So in the context of reviews, this means that we will always have the latest reviews available for that product. It's not an essential thing in commerce to have the latest reviews, but it's kind of a low-hanging fruit that we can demonstrate how you can use SWR with GraphCMS. So one of the nice things about SWR is, it will revalidate data on refocus, on network recovery if it goes down. Even you can set it to a kind of poll on a certain certain intermittent period. You can see every kind of 10-15 seconds go off and revalidate this data, rehydrate my UI. And one of the other things that's really nice is actually being able to mutate that data locally. So you've got a local cache that you can actually mutate. So what you might want to do is you might have a form to submit a review on a product page. You submit that form, and you can instantaneously essentially update that cache to insert that new review in the UI. So your UI will kind of be super fast, and in the meanwhile that post request or that mutation in the instance of GraphQL will be going off in the background and actually updating that entry in the database. So that's what we're going to be using today. We're going to kind of just quickly show how we can query data with SWR inside of our product pages. And then we're going to add a basic form to essentially post a new product review, and that will use Next.js API routes and SWR to actually mutate our cache. So if we just dive into the GraphCMS project here, I've quickly added a review schema, pretty basic, just a few fields. So we're looking for, we want each review to have a name, an associated email address, the actual content of the review. So what does that person think of this product? A rating 1 to 5. That's optional, it's not required. And of course, a product reference. So this reference field here is saying basically this review has to belong to a particular product. In this case, one product. A review can't belong to many products, but a product can have multiple reviews. So if we just go into the content here, we have a single review by myself, and that's on our one of our long sleeve tees. So we're just going to go ahead and just fetch this data down using SWR with, I think, GraphQL request. So yeah, let's get stuck in. So inside of VS Code here in the project, this is our current product page UI. So this is the component that you see here for this bit here. So we're just going to add the reviews down the bottom here. But first, before I actually add any UI, I just want to go off and get that JSON from GraphCMS with SWR. Don't believe it's installed currently. It is not. So I'm going to add an SWR dependency. Now it's important to know that SWR is not actually a library that will fetch the data for you. It's just hooks that will take care of the cache and the revalidation, stuff like that. You actually still need to provide a fetch function for it. So whether that's just plain old fetch, or in this case we're going to use GraphQL request, which is essentially a GraphQL kind of friendly wrapper around fetch. So SWR doesn't do any data fetching for you. It's just going to handle the caching of that and the revalidation of that data. So you will always need some method to actually fetch your data. So we've added that there. We already have a GraphCMS client that we've instantiated using GraphQL request. So we can just import this and use this with SWR and then actually write our kind of query that as we want. So just down here somewhere, just gonna add, so we gotta use SWR hook. Let's just quickly look at this. So we gotta use SWR hook. This first parameter is actually the key, and that's what is essentially unique and is stored in the cache. So when we fetch our reviews, we will need to provide like a unique identifier, which will probably be the product ID, to actually store that data in the cache so we can make sure it's revalidated. So that's the first parameter. That's just a single string there. You can pass an array, which is what we'll be doing, an array of strings. And then the second parameter is actually our fetcher. So as I said, you can actually, this is completely kind of agnostic to what you're doing. It's completely agnostic to that. So, in this case, we're using GraphQL request, or you can use fetch, whatever you want. So the second part here is the query. Essentially, the second parameter is the query that we're going to be using. So we'll go off and do that now. So we're going to do, so use SWR, actually returns 2 parameters for us. So it returns 2 keys, the data and error. If data is undefined, then that's considered the loading state. Once that promise resolves, data will resolve to either data or null. In that case, you've got an empty state. Yeah, so let me just double check here. So in this particular case, we want to write our query is going to be used as kind of the key to identify this particular product review or these product reviews in the cache. So we want to write a query, and I've got all that kind of stuff. Is it not? Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll just write that now. So we're just going to write our product reviews query. This was going to need one variable, and this will be our actual product ID. And essentially what our query will look like is, if we dive into the GraphCMS playground here, it's going to look like this. So we are looking for an array of reviews where the product ID matches this particular product. And that ID is going to come from our page props. So because we're using this here, we should have the ID available to us inside of the page props. So should I say should. We'll double check that. The ID there of the product should be available on this product page prop, which is given to us by get static props. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly copy this review, this query. Excellent. Now, of course, we want to place that hard-coded variable with our hard-coded value with our product ID variable, and we want all of the fields back that we have. If I remember rightly, that's everything. Name, email, content, rating. Yeah. So we're not particularly bothered about the product. Excellent. So that's our query. What we also need to key is that we actually need to key the product ID. So that's now, so yeah, if you look here, multiple arguments. Yeah, so we're essentially going to use an array as the key parameter, and that means that this particular data that's going to be returned will be cached with that query and with that product ID. And that's important. Otherwise, what would happen is if we didn't pass that product ID, we would essentially be overwriting the cache each time we change product page, because we'd just be overwriting that product query. So we need to pass that product ID as like a part of the unique identifier. Excellent. So now that we've passed that first parameter use SWR, which is our keys, we need to actually pass our fetcher function. So as I said before, we're using GraphQL request. We already have a GraphCMS client that we're using inside of get static paths and get static props. So we can just reuse that. It's configured to query for published data. It doesn't have mutation. The access token doesn't have mutation rights. So we'll be fine using that inside of the client here. It's always just kind of careful of when using tokens on the front end in the client side. Just be wary that those could be kind of the security considerations around that. You might want to have a particular, you might want to create a new token that was just scoped to query for published data, and then you can kind of revoke that if there's any security concerns. I'm just going to import GraphCMS client here. Is that right? Let me just check that. Doesn't look right. How have I been importing that elsewhere? Get all products. GraphCMS client.request. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, that's a class instance of GraphQL request, and on that we have a request method. And what we can do here is we just pass our query. I feel like I missed something here. I have missed something. Yeah, so if we look at the docs here, go back. Yeah, so you will notice that this fetcher function actually has params as well, and that's the query. So essentially each key used in SWR is the query, or is a param in this function. So we need to pass the query. We will also need to pass our variable. So the signature of this is going to look something like this. Product ID. And then what you can do is you can essentially say query, and then so GraphQL request accepts 2 parameters as well. Actually 3 parameters, I apologize. We want to pass our query, and then we pass some variables, and our product ID is our variable. Okay, so this should run now. We should actually have some data returned from us if that product has reviews. So let's just quickly add some JSON at the bottom here. This will be ugly, but we're just interested in getting data out here. We'll have to make this conditional. Because if data is undefined, data will be undefined initially, so it'll error. So what do you do? Make that just conditional with a ternary. Okay. Undefined. This is, I know why. I know exactly why. So this is a little gotcha with Next.js. So when you're using environment variables with Next.js, if you want them exposed inside of the client, so client side, which in this case we do, we need to prefix this with next public. Otherwise, it's undefined. So that's why that is undefined there, because we don't have, yeah, it's essentially trying to hit an endpoint that doesn't know what it's looking for. So we'll need to rebuild this. You're going to see my keys, but we're not particularly bothered about that at the moment. Those are all test keys for Stripe. Don't get too excited. So I will just recompile this app. Missed that. Need to prefix that. So what I would say here is it's probably worth us actually having separate keys, one for server side and one for public side, public requests, which we can kind of do in the GraphCMS dashboard. Just create separate API tokens essentially. Yeah, let's see what we get now. There we go. There's our JSON for our reviews. So that's the one for that. And if we go to another product, what will happen is it'll be essentially be empty. If we go to this product, yeah, so reviews is empty there. Excellent. So you'll see how fast it is when we're actually navigating around. So when we're switching pages here, you'll see that that data is instantaneous, and that's because it's being read from the cache. So it reads from the cache immediately on page load, and in the background it's going off and revalidating with the API and bringing down any new content, and then we'll automatically rehydrate the UI for us. So it's really nice. So in theory, how that would work for reviews is if I am kind of, excuse me one moment, girlfriend's phoning me. I might have to phone her back in a second. But in theory, how that works with the reviews is if I am browsing around a product site, and if somebody was to submit a review whilst I'm on that page, or whilst I come back to that page a couple of moments later, SWR will validate that data or that query and actually bring down that new review for us to display in the UI. So it's really nice. Some really nice kind of API that's, you know, very easy to get started with, as you've seen there. It's very simple and easy to get started with. So I would recommend checking that out if you have a use for client-side data requests. This is in a very similar to React Query. Obviously Apollo client has its own cache as well, things like that. So SWR is not unique, but it's my preferred way of doing things at the moment. So now that we have our reviews in the UI, and it's by no means pretty, but I'm not going to bore you with creating a UI today. We're going to actually just quickly add a field, a form to actually submit a new review for a product. And then what we'll be able to see is actually that form being submitted and us then mutating that local cache that we have with SWR to update and include our new submitted review. So I'm just going to take a quick second, just speak to my girlfriend, and I'll be back in a moment. Hello, sorry about that short intermission. Just had to take a phone call from my pregnant girlfriend. Just making sure everything was alright with her. We'll just to recap where we are. We have our reviews now in the UI. It's come from GraphCMS. We also, what I think would be good is just to kind of show SWR working without the actual mutation. So I'm going to set up a form to create a review. We'll do that in a minute. But first what I'll do is I'll actually just create a new review in the CMS. And that will kind of, we'll get an idea essentially of, you'll see how SWR will revalidate that data instantaneously as I go back to that tab. So as we go back to this tab, it will revalidate and we'll see a new review. So we'll just quickly create a new review here. This is just to highlight kind of what SWR does. If we save and publish that. Save and publish our product. Go back here. There you can see, look how quick that was to just kind of automatically revalidate and rehydrate our UI. Beautiful. So we're going to be able to do that with an actual form. So an actual form on the page to write a review if you've bought this t-shirt. And then essentially add it to mutate the local cache data to actually add it there pretty fast. So one of my other favorite libraries for React, especially when working with forms, is React Hook Form. This is my go-to form library. Other people like Formic, Final Form, but this is my preferred way of working with forms. So let's just quickly add a very basic form, and then what we'll do is we'll write the mutation with an API route, an XJS API route, and then we will mutate that data locally on the client. Okay, so we'll just add a form, very basic form that's just got a few fields that we need, and then we'll start to hook it up with the GraphCMS mutation. So just going to quickly add, we don't need resolvers because we're not going to bother with any validation for now. Okay, so then on here, I'm just going to quickly drop that in. Makes it a little more okay. Okay, so we'll just kind of drop in a form here. What we'll do for size is actually import what we need. So we need use form from React Hook Form, and then inside of here, methods, so returns an object. Very not used to using this without validation, so I don't actually think we need to pass any params to use form. No, not by looking at this. You just use this, use the ref param on your inputs to essentially register the field, and that will use the name key on that field as the essentially as the is the key in the form. And that will what will be available to us for JSON to actually send that to our API route. So I'm just going to destructure handle submit here, methods. What else do I need to just register? I think, yeah. ref register. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, so we'll just have form on submit. Submit. Nobody likes making a form. It's a name. What we want, email. Get rid of that. Ref register. Yes, there's kind of stuff here. What else have we got? We want a text area, right? That'll be our content, which is a multi-line field. And then we just need to create a onSubmit function to actually handle the form submission. We'll have data. I'll just do console log data. Should have a very basic form now. Yeah, it's here somewhere. Okay, so should probably add some labels, I guess. This is pretty bad. At least now we'll be able to see the forms. Again, this is not a UI masterclass, so please do not think I'm trying. Do not be discouraged by the quality of the UI or lack of the UI. We're simply just showing how we can mutate data. Excellent. So if I submit this form now, we should just get a log in the console of our values. On submit, handle submit. Maybe I need a button. Yes, I do. I need a button. Button type submit. Submit. There we go. Now the reason content's not there is because I haven't passed a ref. Field is missing name attribute. There we go. Excellent. So we've got our JSON. Yeah, it's a weird return in there. So we've got our JSON here. So what we now want to do is actually kind of create a Next.js API route. Let's pull up the docs quickly for that. Essentially, these are a way to kind of build an API to query other APIs or that kind of stuff, and it's following this kind of same conventions with Next.js. So anything in the pages API directory will be built as a serverless function essentially, and you can just kind of call that from within Next. Yeah, so it's just export a function from that file, and you can then call that inside of your Next.js pages or components. So we need to do that in this particular case because we want to disguise the GraphCMS mutation. We can't do that on the client side because that would, yeah, we don't want to expose those mutations to anybody. So what we'll do is we will API, what we'll do is we'll create GraphCMS, create review or product review. I can't remember. Yeah, so we're going to say export default async rec res try catch. So we'll just quickly return yeah, so we'll just quickly hook up that this function here, this API route, this function. We'll just quickly hook that up with our form. We'll send the data as well. So what we need to do is we actually just want to call fetch. So we're not going to use GraphQL, the GraphQL mutation inside of this component. We're going to use it inside of the API route. So all we need to do is actually just call or use fetch. We'll make this function async, await fetch, and then all you're doing is using a relative path to the function we just called. So that'll be API GraphCMS create product review. Of course, fetch API is like so, method post. What you would normally do is have some kind of token. So in this case, you might have authenticated users and you want to pass their token to the API route just to make sure that they're authenticated, and then they can only request the reviews that they've made or something like that, or submit a review and it's associated to their user. But for this purposes, we're just going to send the data as it is. We just need to do, what is it, content type. Now, SWR recommend that you just kind of create a helper function, a helper fetch function that essentially will take care of this, and you can just pass it the URI of the API you're trying to hit. So they recommend just having a function. Oh, let's see here. Where's it at? Yeah, so this fetcher. Yeah, they're saying create a fetcher function that'll essentially handle all the kind of fetch magic for you. But again, we're not particularly bothered about that in this case. We just want to get this working. So inside of our function now, we will just log out our rec.body. So what we'll see here in this console log, not in the browser because we're server side here. So inside of our Next.js server that's running, we'll see our JSON submitted. I'll just refresh this. There you go. So that is the JSON from our form inside of our API route. So now what we can actually do is use that JSON inside of our our GraphCMS mutation to actually create the review. So we also, yeah, so let's go ahead and start doing that. What we'll do is we want to have a separate. We're gonna create a separate GraphCMS client, which is going to be a mutation client. So I'll just copy this. And then what we'll do is, so we're going to set up a new token. So because we don't need these in the browser, we can remove that prefix. We don't need this in the browser. That will obviously remain the same. Our URL, our GraphCMS endpoint is the same on client and in the server. But we're going to create a new mutation token inside of GraphCMS. So we're going to our settings, got an API access, I want a new token here. So we've got our dev token, which is what we've been using. I'm just going to create mutation. Draft queries, published, mutation. The reason why that is because when you mutate data with GraphCMS, it's like automatically on the draft stage. So it's a separate mutation to then publish that. So that's why you have to enable draft queries, I think. I could be wrong there, but that's my assumption. So we will create that. And we'll copy that and add it to our .env local. And we'll say GraphCMS mutation token. Again, these are Stripe test keys, so don't be alarmed. It's not great that they're there, but what can you do when you're streaming? Alright, GraphCMS mutation token. So we're exporting this new client from our mutation here. So we can import this like so. That's the one we want. We want to do request. And then it's going to be mutation. Create product review. And it's going to have we're going to have a variable of review, and I'll need to check the type of that. And we'll have product. Yeah, I need to check the type of that, and then it'll be product ID. Should be an ID. So what I mean when I say the type is because GraphCMS will generate input types. So it'll be review input, review create input. Yeah, that's the one we want. And then it will be create, what is it? Create review. Yeah, mutation create review. Create review. And that's going to look like this. Data as review, create input. Yeah, so I think what I'll need to do is actually just send this single. So what we need to do is essentially is connect, is pass that product ID inside of our body to connect the product to their newly created review. So what that'll look like is essentially we'll do that inside of our form, inside of our onSubmit function. It's going to look like, what's it going to look like? We'll spread in data, which is our name, email, and content. Those are our 3 required strings. We're not going to bother with rating today. And then product is going to look like connect ID. So it's going to look like this. Product connect ID, and that's going to be product.id. So now if I submit that, I'll just comment that out. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, so that's everything. I believe that's right. Yeah, product. It's going to look like this. Ah, hang on a sec. I have it here. Where? No. Okay, let's just try it. What's the worst that could happen? So now we only have a single variable, review, and then it's going to be data review. Get rid of that second product ID variable because it's a part of our review there. Okay, so we need to pass the actual review variable. So again, that's a second argument in GraphQL request. And what we'll do is we'll say its review is rec.body. And then we should have a review back. In theory, we should get a actual review here created from our form on the front end. Okay, I don't think that worked. Yeah, that didn't work. So obviously errored. Let's just catch this error because we're not returning anything useful there. Here we go. So the problem was input field create review of type must contain a selection of subfield. Of course, I need to actually return some fields from our mutation. That would be helpful. So when we mutate data does this look right? This looks wrong. Yeah, so when we mutate data with GraphQL, you can actually specify the fields that you want to return. So in our case, we want to be able to put this straight into the UI, so we need everything. So we're going to need the ID, the email, content, email, name. Yeah. Right, let's try again. This time, hopefully we get an actual review created. Keep going the wrong way again. Undefined. That's because I need to alias that. So yeah, this is another little gotcha. With GraphQL request, essentially what's returned is the keys for the kind of root fields of the queries or the mutation. So in this case, create review is returned in here, not review. So I can just alias that like so, and then we'll get review. Just to test my theory, we should have 3. Yeah, so there's our draft review that I've just created by clicking that form. If I click this again, if we go back to There you go. There's our ID, content, name, and email for our review that was just created. Nice. So instead of just reviewing that there, we're going to just return this. Like so. Do I want that? And then essentially this will be const review. So now we can actually get this in the front end. And then the next step is to actually use SWR to mutate that. So if I open my console here, there we go. Of course, this is the fetch response. What we actually need to do is actually parse that. This is the fiddly thing with fetch, in my opinion. This is why it's best to have a kind of a fetcher function that you can just wrap all this logic in, and then you can just pass it where you need. But we're not particularly worried about that right now. Actually, what I'll do is and my cat is about to make an appearance. Thank you, Gus. Hello, Gus. You sit there. You watch me. Boy. The cat. He sleeps all day. He's pretty much nocturnal, but of course he wants to make an appearance today when I'm streaming. So our review should now actually be JSON. There we go. Excellent. So now that we are, and what you'll notice as well is, although that's interesting, we still only have two. Oh, I know why that is. So you'll be wondering, why is this still only 2 reviews despite me having hit this form about 5 times? And that's because these are published reviews, and our mutation will insert that review in the draft content stage. So we need to publish it as well. So that's a separate mutation that we'll need to run, which is a little frustrating, if I'm honest. Let me just check what that is. Publish review. Where ID. Okay, so we'll want to do this in our API route. So you got review there. What we'll do is we'll say it's going to be another. Yeah, so because we can't just use another mutation in this single request. We're going to have to write another request because we're dependent on this ID being returned to actually publish it. So we need the ID from this JSON object, this review JSON, to actually publish it. So we're going to have to create another kind of block here, which is frustrating. Wish you could just publish that. We need a create and publish mutation, essentially. Okay, so that'll be published review. Okay, and then so what this is publish product review, that mutation, and then it's going to be publish review, I believe. Yeah, publish review. This one's an ID and this variable will be the ID of the review that we literally created in the previous mutation. Fix that. Okay, and then our variable is going to be ID review.id. And in theory, we can get rid of these fields from here because we only need the ID at that point, and then we'll get these fields on the published review. That should work. This should work now. Should. Keep saying should. Okay, so let's submit. Okay, that came back. Now, we still only got 2 reviews. That's because we've not mutated the data. There you go. So on that refocus there, when I refocus the window, it's then revalidated and rehydrated the UI for us. But what we can actually do is, and what we're going to do now is actually handle that mutation ourselves with SWR and actually mutate that data kind of instantaneously. So inside of here, this is our kind of basic fetch call to create that and publish that review. But what we want to do, what does that look like? Yeah. What we want to do is actually let's change this a little bit to use a mutate helper. Yeah, so they SWR provides a mutate function, and we can use that to mutate our local cache. So we are particularly interested in this one right here, mutate based on current data. So what that means is, because we're working with a list of reviews and we are creating a new review, we want to insert that new review into our pre-existing cache of the list of data. So this is why we're working with current data. So we're going to use mutate. We're going to get our cache, essentially. We're going to get the current cache for that particular key. Make our fetch call to create the new review. And then with what's returned from that is then return a new cached list, which includes the new review. Does that make sense? So we'll just walk through it in the code. So this is still relevant. We will still need this. But what we're going to do is going to say mutate. And this is the key. So this is we're essentially saying we want to mutate this piece of cache data, and this is the unique key that we used in our query. So in this particular case, it's the GraphQL query with the product ID, and I can't find it, and it's there. So this is our key. Now, what you would normally do is you would kind of write this query elsewhere and just import it, but I haven't done that, so I'm just going to copy this. Just going to copy that. Please forgive me. And then I believe it's reviews. Is that what it looks like? Yeah. Okay, so we're using. I'm just going to hide this right now. Don't need this up. Yeah, so we're using mutate to look up our cache data for this particular query with this particular product ID, and we're returning our reviews. Now, at this point, what we want to do is actually move our fetch call inside of here, uncomment that. And then in theory, all we should have to do is say return an array spreading our reviews and our new review, in theory. Let me just double check that. Yeah. There may be a simpler way of mutate with post data like this or mutate data like this, but this is how I usually do it. Yeah, so let's just try and see. Okay. I'm actually quickly just going to move this form over to the right because it's really hard to. My fantastic CSS skills are just so amazing. What we'll do is do grid calls to this should do it, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so currently we have 3 reviews, 3 published reviews, but we want to add another. So we're going to just populate our form, our email, hello, new review. So what happens now is when I click submit, our function, our onClick function should fire to our API route. Let me just walk through this in the code. So when I click that submit button, our onClick function, our onSubmit function will grab our cache data from our data from the cache for this particular product, those reviews. It will then make a fetch call to our next API route. The next API route will create a new review for that particular product with the form fields that we've filled in. It will then publish that review and return that JSON. And then from that, we will actually just return in the cache, we will update the cache to include our new review as well as the pre-existing reviews. So that's how it should work in theory. Let's just double check. So this should update quite fast. And of course, it's an issue. In order to be iterable, non-array objects must have a sim. Let's see what we've got here. Something's undefined. Okay. Why is that? Why is that undefined? I feel like I know why. I feel like this is actually an object. And then, so we need to structure reviews from that object. And it says it's undefined though. What's tripping me up here? I don't need that. Mutate the key. Async. What? This is frustrating. Why is that undefined? Why is that undefined? That is the right key. Why is that undefined? So I feel like it should not be undefined though. My only guess is that somehow this is a separate key. It's being used as a separate key to the one in the query. Product ID. It's exactly the same. Okay, just to test this theory. Let me just do this quick. We're just going to abstract this query out. Product reviews query goals. This is exactly how I've done it in another project, which is what I don't understand. Okay, so now in theory, get rid of this and do product reviews query, and also update our use SWR to do the same. So now that's the same key. Pretty sure it's the same key. This is frustrating. I'm not sure why. Just bear with me one moment. Sorry, girlfriend was on the phone again. Yeah, let's work through this. So I'm conscious of time now. So let's work through this and figure out what's going on with this. Okay, so I think... That's wrong. Yes, I think this time it worked. I have that many reviews now. I can't even tell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this out. Clear these reviews out, and then we will actually see it working as we need. So let's just quickly delete all these reviews that I've created over the course of this stream. And as we go back to our tab, what will happen is they'll all vanish because SWR will have revalidated. There you go. So now if I click submit, there we go. That's really fast. Local date, local data, local state manipulation there. And just to prove that it's working as the wanted, there is the subsequent entries in GraphCMS. That's really nice. It's a really powerful kind of workflow using SWR with GraphQL and GraphCMS in this particular case to fetch data that, you know, you need more up-to-date data, more dynamic data, things like reviews. Inventory is a more applicable one where you want the inventory to be a true reflection of, you know, product stock levels, that kind of stuff. But reviews is a good one to do as well. So I hope you've seen some value in this stream today. Appreciate you for watching. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers real soon. We'll be back probably next week with some more streams on Next.js and various other Jamstack stuff. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your week and have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.